that I had a scuba diving incident where my tank that I was using was like not balanced with the right oxygen and nitrogen, and I could barely breathe underwater.
How deep down were you?
I was in a shipwreck, like probably 85 feet. So I was a master diver at that time.
Whoa.
I had been diving, I had clocked 100 dives, and I went in the shipwreck and it was murky and super dark. And I was in Thailand and at a really janky, like, scuba shop that I got all the equipment from, which is probably first mistake, right? And I'm down there and I'm like, I can't breathe normal. Like, I actually don't know if I can breathe at all right now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to ALLSMITH for our very first episode of 2025. Just for a brief reminder, ALLSMITH is a place where we explore the edges of human potential and dive deep into the practices that elevate our minds, bodies, and spirits. Today's guest brings a sense of calm, clarity, and strength that resonates far beyond the yoga mat. Kierstie Payge. She's a guiding light in the yoga and meditation community, a force of presence, balance, and unwavering authenticity. And through her practice, she bridges the gap between movement, mindfulness, and reminding us that growth isn't just physical, but it's an inside job. Kierstie, welcome to the show.
What a setup. Thank you. So happy to be here. Honored to be the first guest of the year.
For sure. And as we kind of self-reflect and press a pause or to echo our good friend Brandon Brigado, and as we drop in today, as you reflect on 2025, what were some of the pillars that maybe came up for you as like really cool self-growth experiences, maybe times when you touched another life, maybe moments that, like, you know, when you were sitting with yourself kind of around that New Year time, you're like, whoa, there were some cool things that happened in that 2024 year.
Wow, what a question. A lot went down for me in 2024. I think my overall, if I were to look back and just like put this staple on it, was that we can do really hard things and we can come out of it not hardened, but softened and more open. We don't have to come out of hard things jaded. We don't have to come out of hard things with a lot of like hate or pain in our hearts. We can come out of them with so much love.
Is life happening to you or for you? Right?
I mean, it's all a gift. It's all a gift. And our wounds are where our gifts truly come from. And I think for a long time when I was teaching yoga in the beginning, you know, I tried to be this person that was like enlightened and I'm good and everything's great around me and my world is perfect. And that's why I can be a teacher. But then I realized the greatest teachers are the ones that come from the darkest places, are the ones that really bloom out of the mud, that go through a lot of hardship and come out and are still going and are still trying to share a light, still trying to be optimistic, trying to uplift everyone around them. And I think it's a more relatable human trait that our suffering is almost what binds us. We all have this pain and suffering that we go through, and it's our skills and our tools that we learn along the way that enable us to use that suffering as growth, use that suffering for meaning, for purpose in our life, and to relate with one another. For
sure. It's the epitome of the lotus flower,
100%.
Right? That grows out of mud, and then you have this preconceived notion that it's messy, it's dirty, it's not set up for success. And then all of a sudden, from that navigation, exploration of challenge, blossoms one of the most beautiful flowers we've ever seen.
Yes.
And I think the human experience is so pivotal to that, because we're kind of stubborn creatures innately. And so it takes pain or discomfort to allow us to shift our lenses to be like, okay, what I was doing is no longer working.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to be the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I need to do something disruptive.
Right.
And that's not easy. It's so cliche to say on a podcast, do something disruptive, get in the cold water, go do the marathon.
Do hard things. Like,
Totally. But it's like, it doesn't have to be really aggressive off the bat. Like, just to use cold therapy as an example, I like hold people's hands and like, hey, just get in, dunk your head, and then hop out, and I'll be with you the whole time.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, next time, get in, dunk your head, take one deep breath, and then hop out. And that's like over the course of time, you're kind of like curating and you're funneling things to be a little bit more experiential. But in the beginning, it's like low-hanging fruit. Let's build momentum. Yeah. And I think that's a great way to kind of start our conversation today around like, you overcame quite a bit last year. You overcame a tremendous breakup, which is so relatable to people. I went through something horrific a couple of years ago. And like, it was like, why me? You know, this victimhood, this victim mentality. And then over the course of time, it forced me to, okay, every morning I'm going to make my bed.
Yeah.
Okay, if I can't navigate things myself, I'm going to help others navigate things. And I'm going to give and give and give. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, by giving, it's like allowing me to shine my light. And then it was like, okay, now I'm doing the dishes every day. Now I'm cleaning this. Now I'm taking my dog for an adventure. And it built all these little micro wins, which led to cold therapy and led to putting myself out into the community, to Reiki practice, different healing modalities, meeting new people, exposing myself to different environments and different people. And all of a sudden, slowly but surely, this tiny human that felt broken was all of a sudden like reaching a tiny finger outside the cocoon. And then the next finger started to come out. And before I knew it, 18 months later, my wings were finally spreading. I was like, ooh, I think I'm ready to fly and shift my perspective now. And I don't know if you relate to kind of that metaphor, but it's something that I think is really relatable because we're all going to go through it. We're either in adversity, just left it, or we're approaching it.
It's one small decision at a time. And I love the idea of like thinking about the butterfly. And there's this story of this child walking in this garden, and he sees this cocoon and he sees something trying to break out of it. And he goes over and he cuts open the cocoon, thinking that he's helping this butterfly that's trying to come out by relieving its suffering. But instead of it helping, the butterfly falls on the floor and dies. The next time he passes the same situation, he decides to just sit and watch and allow this caterpillar that's inside to suffer, to make its way out, to get into the nitty-gritty of trying to figure its way out of the cocoon. And then the butterfly flies. And the suffering is like, and it's not even the suffering, it's the hardships of life, because it is truly it's really our own mind that creates the suffering, because everything is neutral, essentially. Every experience that we have is neutral, and it's our stories that create the suffering, the joy, all of those other emotions that we put to it. But this butterfly, it kind of had to go through that trial period of trying to make its way out for it to fly. And I think of that a lot. And in the style of yoga that I teach, we have a part of it where we're just holding a posture for a really long time. And the challenge of the teacher is to not coddle the students and try and save them and pull them out when they start to see the student, you know, having sensations that they don't want to have, trying to come out, and just to allow them to kind of be in their suffering. Because it really is the place where, like you were speaking to, those little decisions you've made along the way begin to blossom into you changing your entire life. Those small edges that you've chosen to step up against, brush up against time and time again, they start to expand your natural reality. And then you just have this, the ceiling starts to break and possibility starts to open. And that comes from choosing those little moments of discomfort every day, even making your bed. Like it does sound so silly, but making your bed, sitting in meditation for a couple minutes every morning, like choosing the stairs instead of the elevator. Like they are also cliche, but a lot of the times those cliche things are real and true in nature. And when we choose them, we're expanding our reality.
They become proof of concept as well. Like those making the hard choice consistently. Now when we're presented with something that's not necessarily a choice, but it's life happening right before us, we can now pause, look in our rearview mirror, and reflectively realize that, like, oh, I've done hard things before. I can do it again. I've always figured this out.
Yeah.
And I think the intrinsic confidence that develops from that is really like, I'm not in control always as to what happens, but I'm in control as to how I react to what happens. And I've always reacted in a manner that allowed me to get out of this hole. And I love that you as an instructor allow people to just be in that space, because if you relate that to grief, so many people want to fix. Right. And sometimes fixing like irritates the person going through it. Sometimes it doesn't allow them to process the different forms of grief and the anger and the sadness and the frustration. Sometimes it's important to feel those things. And I think what I heard from the story that you shared about the little boy passing by that cocoon, holding space is so important. And I think holding space isn't just doing nothing. It's being present. But it's also this energetic chord of like, I'm not coming to help you right now because I believe in you and your greatest potential. And I'm going to hold space for you because I know you can get there. You may not get there on the expectation of your timeline or my timeline, but I do believe that you'll get there. And I think that we can get there together. And what a celebration awaits us on the other side.
This is something I resonate with so much, and I think we learn this when we actually sit and listen to someone. And I don't think that we value the concept of just sitting in presence with people enough. Like, and especially as like givers and healers, we always want to fix people, and the greatest way to do that is to just sit and be an empathetic listener. And there's all these different layers of listening, right? You can listen to respond. You can like barely be listening. But if you are just sitting and genuinely holding space for someone without giving them almost any feedback as to what they should or shouldn't do, if you try that with some of your relationships, it is amazing the way people open up. Because what they actually tend to do is if they're sharing something important to them, they will tend, if you don't interrupt and put your own opinion and your own story to their story, eventually they will come around, they will solve their own problem. They will come to their own epiphany, their own awakening about the thing that they're communicating to you. It happens almost every single time. And if they did want your advice, that they will simply ask for it. But we've all experienced it when we've given our best advice to someone and they don't take it. And then we almost feel like, oh, they're not listening to me. But that's not our job as people in relations with others. Our job is just to be there, to be a listening ear, to be a supporter, a present energy for them. It's not to fix or change them.
I love the way you said that. What comes to mind there is the magic of a moment. And when you think of magic, the phrasing abracadabra comes up, which is technically from the very first language from around the time of Jesus, which abracadabra means, with my word, I create. And sometimes I say to people, like, journaling fills the gaps within our thinking. But if we remove the writing component, and it's like talk therapy or just kind of venting, that allows those words or the thoughts in our headspace that are playing ping pong to become real and tangible, where not only you can see them as the deliverer, but also the consumer. You can kind of see those together. All of a sudden, like you said, it's like, oh, the spoken word now is making this a tangible reality. That seemed like a good thought in my head, but now that it's out here and I have a different lens to it, we can have a different experience with it, and I can solve my problem, or I can take ownership, or I might experience shame or whatever. And then that leaves space for the consumer to say, hey, what do you need from me right now? Would you like me to continue to listen? Are you seeking advice? And I think being very sensitive around asking that is so important. And they might say, I don't know what I need. And then you have to use a little bit of intuition or emotional intelligence, cautiously, of course. But something about that relates to just like this experience of like energy and play and like going through the human experience. And this isn't just for grief and negativity. It's also for positive experiences.
Yeah.
I love the way you said like listening to listen as opposed to listening to respond. That's such a special concept. That's so hard for people.
Oh, I mean, it's hard for especially sitting on a podcast, right? You're like, oh, I want to make sure the next thing I say rings a bell but it really, if I were to just sit here and take in what you're saying, like my body knows how to respond. Like my words know how to respond. If I sit here in my head and almost make it this ego game of like, how do I respond in a way that's going to sound, cool or good, or like I'm knowledgeable, and even in a normal conversation, then like you just fill it with all this unnecessary stuff. And it's not just coming from the heart, just coming from intuition. And you talked about masculine and feminine energy earlier a little bit. Whenever we're trying to fix a problem, that's like a very masculine energy. And we all have this balance of both, right? And I think for women and for mothers and for wives and all, like women in particular, we're really fixers. And whenever we're trying to fix people's problems, we're in a very masculine energy, because the feminine energy can sit back. The feminine energy can listen and receive and be a supporter, but not necessarily fix the problem. Everyone is their best teacher. Like you are your best teacher. We all innately know what we need to do, what decisions we need to make, what we should do for ourselves. We know it. We get very clouded by all of the external stimulation in the world. But if you can just listen and it's almost like a meditation, like you're listening and they're talking, eventually they will come full circle. They will find out what they need, because I'm not going to know what you need. I can explain my experience. That could be helpful in a way, but only you truly know what's best for you.
For sure. The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the sweet cream cold brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level. That's something I say in the coaching space all the time. It's like, hey, this program is like a generalized blueprint to help guide you or maybe create some parameters. But like, your body better than I ever will.
Yeah.
And what's so cool about what you just said, because it happened literally in real time for me, where I was like, oh, she just said that thing. It sparked this thought. Here's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But then I was like, put that on the back burner in the file cabinet, put it on like a little tack to like hang out for a second. Oh, she said this other thing, and like, oh, now this is allowing that thought to now float to the surface. And it's so fun, because it's truly listening, as opposed to like, if you don't truly listen, and for consumers, it's really important too. Like, you'll say something that was like, oh, that was kind of relevant, but like to a point that she made like 5 minutes ago, not to the immediacy of what she was talking about.
100%.
And what comes to mind there is like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I want to share a really cool story with you that relates to what we're talking about, which is when I was in the thick of it, like went through a breakup, was navigating a job shift, jumping full into entrepreneurship, was battling some injuries. My mom was just diagnosed with cancer. There was just so much going on.
Lots of tests.
So many tests, and so many tabs were open. Like, I had this like paralysis by analysis. We're like, where do I start? What do I do? And I just felt full of anxiety and like lost. The only time I felt presence was like going for a run, doing some sort of movement, cold water therapy. And I felt like I was like word vomiting around my circle of trust, which was getting exhausting for all of them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I met this man. He has now become my healer, and he was connected via a mutual friend. A friend of mine was doing some talk therapy with a therapist, and she was like, "Where's your brother located?" And my sister happened to be the person communicating here. I was like, "Oh, he's in San Diego." I ended up meeting this amazing human. And for whatever reason, I went onto his website, called him exactly in that moment. He happened to answer. We had a conversation. He goes, "Hey, can we do a session right now?" And I describe him as my healer because it's not all talk. Sometimes it's breath work. Sometimes it's movement. Sometimes it's homework assignments. And we had a conversation last week that exactly relates to what you were saying about masculine and feminine energy. And he goes, "Bryce, you're great at achievement. Your whole life has been about performance and function. And you're great at setting like, oh, on this date, we're going to do this test. On this day, we're going to do this. Here's the plan moving forward." And he related it to surfing. He goes, "You just want to surf the biggest wave. You want the validation, the claps. You want to ride the biggest wave possible. And you want to do the thing." He's like, "That's all masculine." He's like, "However, there's a flowy component to surfing. You have to paddle out. You have to get past the break. You're probably going to have some whitewater surfing. You're going to have some small waves. You're going to fall a few times. There's going to be times when it's flat and you're out there and you're just kind of vibing with the other people that are out there. Maybe you're out there by yourself and you're feeling the texture of the salt water in your skin. You're feeling the air kind of kiss your eyebrow. You're watching the sun and the texture of the clouds and how your body's either sticking to the surfboard or slipping off the surfboard. Maybe you're frustrated by, your foot continuing to hit some seaweed." But he's like, if you don't pay attention to all that stuff and you're only thinking about the good wave, you're missing out on 90% of the experience. Yeah. And that to me is the yin to the yang, of the masculine to feminine. And now that he's done that, all I really do now is I notice. I'm not trying to hold on tight to everything or that big wave. It's like, oh, if you open your hands a little bit, you can actually hold maybe a little bit more sand or a little bit more of the experience. As I say some of these things, what comes to mind around this relationship between masculine and feminine?
Oh, well, we live in a very masculine forward world, and especially in the States, which I love about this because I'm an entrepreneur in spirit, but it is a lot of achieving. It is a lot of, trying to, like, this hustle culture, constantly trying to show off your success in a sense. And it's been ingrained in us, especially the generations before us. It's been ingrained in us since we were so young. And really, like you said, the feminine energy is the one of flow, is the one of receiving, is the one of not willing and forcing things into action, but allowing things to unfold naturally. It's this very trusting essence. And I think we get a little confused that women are always supposed to be in feminine, men are always supposed to be in masculine. Not true.
No way.
No, we move in and out of those like so often. And it's just about knowing when to be in that masculine and when to be in that feminine. So whenever I'm, on something like this, or I'm creating a retreat or doing a training, I'm fully in my masculine energy because I am talking, I'm teaching, I'm coaching. And then finding the balance to that. Everyone has that balance. And like you just said, the balance to finding the big wave is to sitting and noticing all the waves that came before, right? The balance to going out and leading a retreat is me perhaps hibernating in my house for the week before and not talking to anybody, and learning how to like rediscover those yin and yang qualities within ourselves. And I think as women, we are almost forcing ourselves into the masculine so often. And lately, like, it's just the natural culture of like, I need to be a successful, a super successful business owner. I need to be a perfect wife. I need to be a perfect mother. I need to be all of these things. I need to make the money and be independent. And this, men have this too. But that for a woman that needs more feminine energy than masculine, that can put us in hyperdrive so quickly. And it can really overwhelm us and really stress us out. And there is a way to achieve all of those accolades and things that you want while stepping back and just truly allowing things to come to you.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that by learning, honestly, how to manifest and how to clear out all of the gunk and junk in our mind and actually sit in the feeling of what we want rather than be attached to like the external vision of it, if that makes sense.
No, I love the way you described that. That was actually really, really profound and beautiful in the sense of like, to the human that only has a hammer, every problem is a nail. If you only have access to masculine energy or only feminine energy, it's like that's all you know.
Right.
If you know how to like push and pull and navigate between the two, sometimes you ask for help, sometimes you're in hustle culture, sometimes you're in rest and digest culture. You kind of understand the yin and the yang to that, like you described. There's a lot to unpack there, and the thing that's also interesting, and I've referenced this a couple times. Sophia Bush was talking to Jay Shetty, and I think women get a lot of pressure, right? Like you have you're this age, why don't you have kids? Why aren't you married? Why don't you have all these feminine qualities within the household of, whatever societal norm was painted based on media, social media, movies in the past? That's one side. Then the other side is, why aren't you a business owner? Why aren't you on Forbes, 30 under 30 or whatever the accolades are? Why aren't you making this much money or doing the thing? And she goes, I love them both. Why can't you be both? Right? And it's like women have it even more difficult in the sense of, okay, you have your menstrual cycle. You have the week after where you're like feeling really strong. And then you have the next week where it's like maybe medium strong. And then you have the week leading up to the menstrual cycle where you're anticipating discomfort, emotional dysregulation. And those signs and symptoms are different for every woman. So it's not like just this linear path where I expect to feel the same way every day. And it just, men probably have that in some capacity, but it's not as experiential and visual. And so there needs to be some personal grace that you grant yourself, and then recognition of like, I just need to be.
Yeah.
And in each one of those states, you may not be so experiential physically, but there might be this intrinsic moment where you get epiphanies because you are giving yourself space to stay home for that week before the retreat, hypothetically.
The cyclical nature of the woman's cycle is, if you learn how to use it, the greatest gift.
I believe it.
It's the greatest gift because we can see, if you really do get in touch with that internal cycle, you will know exactly when you are going to feel your best, you're most creative, you're most on, you're most clear, and you'll know when you're going to need to rest. And both of those things, like both truths can be true at the same time. Both of those things are beautiful. It is beautiful to give yourself permission to rest, to do absolutely nothing, to be hyper emotional, to have a day where you just cry for no reason. Like that's a huge energetic release. And if, in yoga, our whole purpose is really to clear out all of that conditioning, stuck energy, all of the like kind of karma that we accumulate throughout our life, and to come back to this more neutral, blissful way of being, untethered by all of our attachments, all of our stories, judgments. And releases like crying, releases like movement, and even those days where you're just at home and you're like, I'm not going anywhere, I'm like curling up under the covers and eating chocolate. That is a release in a way. But I think we look down on that, almost like, I'm emotional, it's a bad thing. Emotions are beautiful.
Yeah.
What a gift to feel completely all the way. And then to know that it's going to change. That is another beautiful thing of the cycle, is that you're never going to get stuck in one place. And this is human nature, right? It's all impermanent. No season, no emotion, no feeling, no physical injury is going to last forever. It's all temporary.
Eventually the storm runs out of rain.
It runs out and it changes. The storm passes. And if women could get more in touch with that part of their nature and honor each cycle that comes and really set their lives up to where it supports that, their like nature of change, it just becomes this beautiful flow of like learning how to listen to your body and knowing when you're truly feeling your best and when you're feeling your best in another way, in an emotional way.
For sure. That famous line of like, if you exchange expectation for appreciation, your world changes forever.
I love it.
But they're words, right? It's really hard to do that when you have this, if you're a very driven human that has these expectations of like, hey, tomorrow's not promised in this world of deadlines. And like you said before, hustle culture. It's really easy too, like when you are in your feels to, you know, try to have a moment of distraction where you're in scrolling nature and you see, you know, other people, oh, I got my third workout in today. I'm doing 75 hard. I'm doing that. You're like sitting there in your feels crying, like, why do I feel this way? I'm not checking the box. And then there's that consciousness of like, everything that's measured doesn't always count. And everything that counts isn't always measured. And it's difficult to measure feelings. Right? And so I guess my question for you is like, what advice would you give to women to surrender? I mean, men too, to surrender to that experience of like, you are where you're supposed to be. You don't need to be in a hurry. And then to supplement that question, is there an app that you suggest that women use to track their cycle so they can have a little bit more of an idea and maybe share that experience with their partner, with their coach, so they can better understand why they are the way they are?
Yes. Okay. So for the app, we'll start there. There's an app called Natural Cycles, and you can link it with your temperature, which is actually how, and this is great. Like, we're never taught this as women when we're young, that we can track our cycle by our temperature. You can tell exactly when you're ovulating, when like the days are that you know, potentially are fertile. You can track your temperature. I use my Oura Ring, but you can just buy a little thermometer and use it. And then you can put it into the Natural Cycles app, and it will tell you the exact days that you are on each phase of your cycle. Cool. And it is amazing to like share with others, because then that person that you're around all the time, especially if it's your partner, like they just know, like they can tell, like if you're having an emotional day, they can be like, okay, how can I support her right now? Like, I'm just going to go, I'm going to like give her space, or does she need me to like get in bed and cuddle her and feed her chocolate? And like, though, like being able to just know that is a gift. And then your question before was? It
was around the concept of like granting yourself the permission to be in those feels.
The surrender.
When you're triggered by social media, or maybe you're talking to a friend and they're telling you about how productive they were that day. You're like, dang, I didn't do shit today.
I mean, this is the topic on surrender in itself, allowing and trusting. That could be like, if there was one thing you ever focus on, it could be that. Because when it's also proven, if we look back at our life and we see all the experiences that we've gone through, like we were talking about earlier, all the experiences that we've gone through, look at where it's led you, right? When you're in it and you think it's this huge inconvenience and this horrible thing that's happening, you can now look back years later and see the perspective. So I think it's just about using what you've experienced before to know that you're truly exactly where you're supposed to be. And that idea of surrender is not just like, oh, I take no action, I let go. We still take inspired action in the direction of, you know, what lights us up, but we let go of the outcome. Like, one of my favorite quotes is, set yourself up for success and let go of the outcome. Like, continue to set yourself up by doing those small inspired action steps and then surrender to the rest. So the trusting of the cycle is like, you've put in the work when you felt great. And now like allow yourself to just pull back a little bit. And maybe you're going to wake up one morning and feel amazing again, and then go at it. And then halfway through the day, you want to relax. Like, just give yourself that permission to listen. And I think that our hyper focus on like getting stuff done and productivity is really a disservice, because a lot of the times doing more like that, when it's forced, that work is not in your highest quality of mind. It's not in your most inspirational mind. If you can work on things only when you're in flow state most of the time, those things you create from that space are so much more beautiful. They're so much more impactful.
For sure. It's mistaking activity for production.
Yes.
in some ways. Like, hey, we're getting the reps in. We sort of checked the box, but it wasn't really of my highest space. It wasn't really what I needed in that moment. And that leads us to yoga. We've referenced it a little bit.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about, or we talked a lot in the clouds today, kind of navigating different experiences and ideas and concepts. But I want to make it a little bit more concrete for people now. And you didn't just come out of the womb on your yoga mat, like with all these ideologies. You developed them through experience and through trials and tribulation. And you were a high-level gymnast when you were younger, which for people that don't know is hours upon hours of reps and sets. And you don't have necessarily a normal childhood. And so I want to paint that picture for people and then explain how you bridged yourself to the space of yoga, meditation, and mindfulness.
Yeah. You know, anyone that's an athlete in their kind of younger stages, they know how much dedication and time goes into it. And I think when you're young, you're just going through the motions. Like your parents are dropping you off at practice, they're picking you up, and you don't really have that hindsight later in life. You're like, I was in that gym for 4 hours a day, 6 days a week for 15 years of my life. You know, like that's if I was doing that now, like, I mean, that's an incredible feat to do.
Yeah, for sure.
It gave me a lot of discipline, a lot of structure. And then when I stopped doing it, I lost a lot of that structure and a lot of that discipline.
The boundaries left.
They completely left. And I didn't really have something that I was focused on anymore. I was so hyper-focused on being this, you know, Olympic level gymnast. And then all of a sudden, when I decided to stop doing it, it was like, well, what do I do now? And naturally, I'm a rebel spirit. So that's where my direction went. I turned into a little bit of a rebellious teen, and I tested all of the edges and boundaries of life and authority, and I got myself into some trouble and, you know, all the fun things that we do as a kid. But that also kind of leads you in a direction of, you know, maybe doing things that are not beneficial to your well-being, you know, when you're a young teenage girl. So there were some years there where I was hyper opposite of discipline and just completely free of all structure. And that's when my mom took me my first yoga class, because she was like, we need something. Yeah. We need to reel you back in. You have all the physical stuff. Like, let's bring her to a yoga class. I think I was 16, my first yoga class. I did it here and there. I just did it for the physical benefit. I remember taking a class and doing a handstand, being like, I got this. I'm a master at yoga. And then it wasn't until probably 8 or 9 years later that I was doing yoga every once in a while, purely for the physical, that I had a scuba diving incident where my tank that I was using was like not balanced with the right oxygen and nitrogen, and I could barely breathe underwater.
How deep down were you?
I was in a shipwreck, like probably 85 feet. So I was a master diver at that time. Whoa. I had been diving. I had clocked 100 dives, and I went in the shipwreck, and it was murky and super dark. And I was in Thailand and at a really janky, like, scuba shop that I got all the equipment from, which is probably first mistake, right? And I'm down there and I'm like, I can't breathe normal. Like, I actually don't know if I can breathe at all right now. So that naturally, like, sent my body into this fight or flight, like, super stress response. I started hyperventilating underwater. And then I made myself up, thankfully. Like, I knew how to do the decompression stops because I had done so many dives before. But that really, like, it kind of sent me in this anxiety, like, warp for the next few weeks. It, like, onset this crazy anxiety. And I kept having this, like, mini PTSD of feeling like I couldn't breathe, even when I was normally walking around. And this was all while I was still in Thailand. And how you were saying, like, the teacher appears, like, this is the exact moment. I was in Thailand and I met this girl, and she was a yoga teacher. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I just need to talk to you about this. I have been having these crazy panic attacks ever since I got in the scuba diving accident last week. And I feel like I can't breathe. She was like, meet me tomorrow morning at sunrise and we will do a meditation and I'll teach you some breath work. Did the breath work, did the meditation, is the first time I felt ease in that whole week. And if anyone's ever experienced panic attacks, they feel like you're dying, you know?
Intense.
It's so
pressure
intense.
In the chest.
So intense. And I was living with that for that whole week. And it was the first time I felt relief. So when I came back to the States, I was like, something is up with this meditation and breath work. I need to relearn how to breathe again because I'm having panic attacks. I'm having crippling anxiety. And it almost took this kind of like traumatizing experience to bring up everything I had been kind of like shoveling down the last year, like few years of my life. And everything came to the surface. And I remember the first time I sat in meditation, I had the horrible experience. Like a lot of people do the first time they sit with themselves. It was like 2 minutes. I closed my eyes. Everything came up and I opened my eyes and I ran. I was like, I will never do that again. Next morning, I was like, no, I'm going to sit with it. And from that moment, I just had to force myself to sit with what was coming up. I had to relearn how to breathe. And then I kept getting deeper into my physical practice, but it wasn't physical anymore. It changed completely because it was more about learning how to attune my nervous system, how to change the energy in my body, how to stop reacting to my like anxious thoughts. And that's how I honestly feel like yoga in that moment in time when that teacher found me, it saved my life, truly. And everyone has that thing that like saved them, right? I mean, I think most people have that thing. And that was it for me. Learning how to breathe again and calm myself down when I felt those moments of pure panic.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I felt so much throughout your description there, and also just this concept of like we're in such a distracted world, right? Like it's easy to attempt to sit with ourselves and we're distracting ourselves with music or with the concept of like, you know, squirrel syndrome, squirrel.
Yeah.
And being able to sit with yourself and allowing those things to come up. I mean, it sounds to me that it took a version of pain / your version of rock bottom, or in this case, ocean bottom, to kind of allow yourself like, okay, like that almost took everything away. I need to ask for help. I'm not sure who, where, what, or how. And it's this unique blend between spirit, God, energy, universe, creator, where this woman appears, like you said. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. And something about that just perks my eyebrows of curiosity a little bit around maybe there's so much opportunity around us, but if we're so focused on the expectations as to how we think our life is supposed to be, how we think we're supposed to look, how we think we're supposed to perform, how much money we're supposed to make, supposed to, we forget to realize like the beauty of like what's right there and that it is enough and that we are enough. But it's this constant reaching culture of like, I'm going to try to pursue the carrot. I'm going to try to get the money. I'm going to try to get the lifestyle. And I really love this concept of like, just be on your mat. And I've heard you describe it before when you started learning from Johnny Kest.
Yeah.
This idea that Jordan Peterson talks about that we're a culture of hierarchy where we're constantly comparing left to right, upper, lower. You know, if you get into an elevator with people, you're constantly like, oh, I want to like size these people up. And I think that was happening a little bit in yoga from his lenses with the mirrors, with the body composition, with the Lululemon pants and like the comparative culture of, you know, how somebody looks and the sex appeal and the breath work and how good people are at postures and how ripped they are or whatever. And then all of a sudden the mirrors get removed. The lights get dimmed. And you're forced to be with self.
Yes.
Let's unpack that a little bit.
So I have meditated every day for the last like 1,500 days.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. And it was because I hated it so much in the beginning. But what I've noticed through a meditation practice, and this isn't like new to me, this has been known for thousands of years from people sitting in meditation. And that was essentially the very essence of yoga, was just self-inquiry. When we sit and we inquire within, clarity reveals itself. And it is a slow burn of doing that. But you start to notice the way that your mind works, the way that it functions. And then that's when you have the opportunity to begin to rewire it, to almost like completely rewire your conditioning in a sense. For me, that whole process of learning to breathe again was essentially me learning how to take my mind and, instead of give in to a story or a feedback loop, to recenter on my breath and to know that I'm okay right here and now. To truly show up with everything I was experiencing, not try and distract myself from it, but be with it and let it move through our body. And it's the same concept we were talking about earlier, is every storm will pass. And when we sit in meditation, we call it anicca. We notice that ever-changing nature of thoughts, ever-changing nature of ourselves, the cyclical nature of life in general, which allows us to start to loosen our grip on all things around us, because we realize nothing is really ours. There's no need to attach to certain things, that they are all fleeting. And that can sound almost like cynical in a way, but it's actually beautiful, because we can appreciate things more when they are there. Even those feelings that we may have adverse reactions to, like we said before, are gifts. And that first, so Johnny Kest, who created the 7 doorways, which is this beautiful philosophy of like a yoga class, essentially. That first door that you walk through, we call it sacred space. And it's essentially just showing up exactly as you are. Exactly as you are, with all your stuff. Don't fix it. Don't change it.
And also don't leave it at the door.
Don't leave it at the door. Bring it here. Come as you are and be with yourself. Be that empathetic listener back to your own self. That's the whole quality of this first part of opening up the doorway, of then practicing yoga, because it begins with you choosing to take a look inside, to just choose to look inside and see what's there, and just start to kind of, I don't know, we can then put a lot of pressure on ourselves, like I have to heal. The yogis would say we are all already healed. We're all whole already. There's nothing left to heal. It's all story that we've created. Every experience has been neutral, and it's you that have created the story around it. You're already whole. There's nothing left to fix. The journey is to remember that, right? That's the practice, to return to that home where you're already peace, where everything externally can be happening, storms everywhere, like that situation you were in when everything seemed to be in disarray. But like, you're the eye of the storm, you're at peace. That's the yogi's journey.
Love that so much. I want to hold space for it for a second and let that kind of soak in to our listeners and to you and with me, because it's such a great reminder to allow things to come, to go. And there's, like you said, a cynical ideology around impermanence, which is really the only permanence, which is such a paradox. But there's also the beauty of like, wow, if I only get this moment with this thing or with this person, why not make it beautiful? Something about that makes presence so important. And in a society that's constantly a little bit sad or depressed from the past or what could have been, and anxious about the unknown or uncertainty of what will eventually be, we forget to be in the now. It's part of the reason I actually tattooed it a while back, be here now.
I love it.
And it's such a reminder of exactly that. I mean, you know this in entrepreneurship. Like when I decided to first take the leap, it was like, I need to create the business. I need to do the business structure. I need to create the business plan. I need to know my projections. I need to see which clients want to be a part of this journey. What's the branding going to be? What's the merch going to be? What's the tagline going to be? There's this. And inevitably, it feels so overwhelming, like you're drinking from a fire hose. But then you're like, whoa, it's kind of really cool that like the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a step. It's, like I said, so cliche, but when you actually practice the art of these cliche sayings, you're just like, I just got to go from here to there right now.
Yeah.
That one little bit. Cool. Let's create the LLC. Okay, cool. Let's create the business plan. Okay, let's create the branding. It's fun. It's like a project that you're just kind of like, sometimes you're adding, sometimes you're trimming the fat, sometimes you're adding a little bit of color. What are your thoughts around just this concept of presence, and what do you share in your teachings to help create buy-in around such a distracted world? Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinyan Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinyan is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag, or even an overnighter. Kinyan's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinyan.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey.
Well, what was coming up for me when you were talking about starting your business is like this piece of advice that I got that just like stuck with me forever. And it's just treat life as your playground. It's just a big experiment. And what we keep coming back to, like if things are just what they are until we give them meaning, like you starting your business and you making these, little mistakes or failing here and failing there, like I did so many times, when we're in it, we can feel like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I made a mistake. But if we can look at it as like, wow, thank goodness I did that, like because it redirected me to this place, and just treating your life like that. Like there's no way you can fuck it up. Like there's no way you can mess it up. You can do things that maybe give you a different like outcome than you expected, but that outcome is always going to lead you towards the next thing that you have to rediscover. And I think removing the pressure of the timeline, of the perfection, of it looking a certain way allows you to be present in that sense. And in the style of yoga that I teach, there's a lot of freedom. So I'll like give you a flow and then I let you do it on your own a little bit, and I turn up the music and it's super fun. And the purpose of that is to let yourself get lost, to let yourself take a different route than the person next to you, to let your body tell you where to go, right? To maybe just sit down and meditate instead. And it's really learning how in every moment, like we have information coming to us about what we need. And if we're not present, we're making decisions based on external stimulation, other people's thoughts, opinions, other distractions. And we're not truly listening to what our true nature wants and needs from us in that moment. So I think it's to continue to coming back to this place of just letting yourself play with your decisions and knowing that they're not going to be wrong. You're going to make every decision the right one for you.
Yeah, I love that so much. It's less rigidity, which is so cool.
Yes.
And I experience this a lot in fitness, where people will, like, if they don't have as much experience in the space, they'll do something and they'll kind of like peek over the corner of their eye like, hey, Bryce, am I doing this right? I'm like, does it feel good? Right? And it's like, I don't know, like I have a lot of schooling in different forms of exercise science, exercise physiology. And the thing I've come to realize is, like, the body keeps the score to let you know if you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, movement is movement. There's not really right or wrong. It's, does it cause pain? Does it create something that feels a little bit unorthodox? Can we clean up certain things and make them a little bit more refined? Yeah. But maybe we're so married to functionality and form that we're forgetting intensity. So maybe let's add a little bit of flow and speed. And then it becomes this, like, playground, like you said. And that's really how I view fitness. Like, half the time, all my clients can speak to this. Like, I go, hey, come play. And it's an explorative nature. It's not like a black or white, like right or wrong, good or bad. It's like, no, let's go move. Let's explore the boundaries of your capacity and your willingness to push and pull and hinge and squat and carry things and then hold positions and challenge the edges of mobility and flexibility, and also perspective. Like, I call it playful perspective architecture, where movement just happens to be the vehicle.
Right.
And I think there's so much there that gets unlocked through then the depth of conversation in the in-between. And the reason why I bring that up is, like, if you were to look at like a 5x5 back squat, everybody thinks about like 5 sets of 5 and they're thinking about that. But the magic is really in the dash, in the in-between of the conversation maybe they have with me, maybe they have with somebody else, maybe they have with a passerby, and the depth of connection of that. And sometimes it's silence and you're with self of like, oh, my knee was collapsing a little bit. And it becomes this reflective, explorative nature. And I've heard people describe when taking your class, sometimes people have this anticipatory nature where they're like, oh, this is the pose and I know the next one that's coming, so I'm going to like predetermine and jump ship. And sometimes you flip the script and you make the transitions a little bit unorthodox for people, so they can't be in their mind. They have to get into their body.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Will you describe where that kind of came from and like what that does to unlock presence and playfulness in your students?
Yeah. So, a lot of the like yoga classes that have made their way into like the mainstream, they really focus on like physical alignment and anatomy. And I'm not saying that that's wrong in any means. That's really beneficial for some people. But what that does is it kind of takes the idea of moving energy out of it, because you're kind of locked in these positions and you're moving in like a very like structured way that
it's like linear and robotic.
Yeah. It's like your body needs to look like this. The yogis had no rules on what physical yoga was supposed to look like. The whole purpose was to move stuck energy. That was the whole goal of physical yoga practice. So when we get really rigid with what it looks like, we start to use that part of our brain that is judging, that is conforming, that's looking in the mirror, that's comparing. And it's not the state of our brain where we actually are in flow and presence and focused on our breath. It's the opposite. It's the masculine side versus that feminine energy. So, and I'm not saying all of yoga is feminine. It was actually made for men, but the movement aspect of it does drop you into that flow state. These big, different, challenging transitions are really just there as experiential ways to test your reactivity in your mind. So if I'm taking you through a crazy transition you've never done before, it's not about, yes, it's physically good for you, of course, but that's just a byproduct of me testing your reactions. If it's something that like you've never done, you're immediately going to be like, what is this and why are we doing it? Right there. That's an opportunity to just breathe through it and notice. Eventually, when we do that enough, we start to see that like all of our ideas and boxes that we've placed around things, there's so much more possibility and potential than what we think they're supposed to be. So I use the shapes as a vessel of noticing where you are trying to perfect everything in your life and allowing you to let go and try something different and try something new. At the same time, it's using this idea of matching your breathing. So it's opening movements and closing movements, playing the opposites of your body, using the duality of your breath in unison with these different shapes. So that's how we get into that like flow state, muscle memory, like you're writing it on your internal hard drive so that your body just goes through it.
Helping people upgrade their operating system, letting go of rule books, creating generalized frameworks.
Yes.
But the framework is in alignment with movement and play and not with expectation.
1000%. That's why there's no mirrors. The lights are low, right? We're not ever sitting in a posture where I'm telling you, push all of your weight into your outer left pinky toe. Everyone's physical anatomy is different. We all have skeletal variation. There is not a single way a single shape would look the same in somebody else because we all have these different bodies, different experiences in our body. And if we're our best teacher and that's all we're trying to rediscover in our yoga practice, then why would I know what's best for you?
That's so beautiful. It's so cool because sometimes you look at very profound movement patterns of yoga on a mat on Instagram, and it looks so flowy, and then somebody else tries it and it's rigid and they're falling and they're feeling insecure and they're labeling it as like, oh, I'm just not flexible, or I'm not this. And all it really is exactly what you said. It's a moment. It's an opportunity to be like, I'm going to incrementally improve this strategy, but the most important way that I improve by just being, by surrendering to the experience rather than being married to an outcome. That's so cool.
Said it so well.
What's the best advice that you've ever received?
Oh gosh, that is like such a question. I think that we like live by different types of advice, like depending on when we need things, like it's such a silly one, and it's not silly, it's very profound in its own right. But my dad used to always say it to me, and he was just like, everything in moderation, follow the middle. Everything in moderation, follow the middle path. And the way I look at that is like how we've been talking about things being neutral. We put our own stuff on top of every experience. And if I experience something and I go fully one way with it and I just take it and run with it, and I hit this really high in like a good way or this really high in like a low way, I have given out all of my energy to the said thing. If we can be in the middle path and we can learn how to use our energy and to keep it contained and not leak it out and give it to things that aren't true and necessary, if we can stay in that present route, that present place, then life just flows so much better for us. And I think he was saying that more in the essence of like moderation, literally, like just also don't be too hard on yourself, but be hard on yourself enough, eat what you want, but also be healthy. And it's really just this way of living where you're just not putting too much pressure on yourself. And you're allowing yourself to be in the middle.
I love that. Navigating the messy middle is such a important part of the human experience, because we want to condition ourselves to conceptually understand, like, follow these 10 steps.
Yeah.
It's this way or that way, or like even labeling people be like, oh, Kierstie the yogi, right. Bryce the podcaster.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're just humans.
Oh my gosh.
And sometimes I podcast, sometimes I'm a yogi, sometimes I'm a fitness coach, sometimes I'm just a guy, sometimes I'm doing yard work, sometimes I'm a dog dad. We all have this malleability in our world that we're not any one thing. And I think yoga is such a great expression of that we're so many things. We're taking all the ingredients of our experiences, we're putting them into a smoothie and trying to create something that's beautiful, digestible, and all the things all the time. And sometimes you screw it up. Sometimes the texture is off. Sometimes it doesn't flow as well. But that's all part of the human experience, is the tinkering and the peaks, the valleys, and everything in between.
It It absolutely is.
Do you have a mantra for 2025 or a focal point that kind of is help guiding your principles this year?
I chose 3 words this year. I chose one personal word, which is peace. Just simple as that. Just peace within, peace around me, my environment. I chose the word trust for my relations, and not just relationships with people, but with God, with source, with my work, with everything in my life, trusting it's unfolding. And then for my career, my dharma, my purpose, I chose vibrancy. I want it to be bright and big and bold and beautiful this year. I want the light from whatever I do to shine out and to never dull or dim. And those are my 3 statements.
So we're going to see you in some bright yoga outfits on all your different retreats this year.
Yeah, definitely.
I dig it. If you could give a piece of advice to others in 2025, or maybe have a message on a billboard of some sort, what would you share with others as we're kind of transitioning from this foggy pandemic era to, worrying about so many different things economically, socially, politically? Now we all have this blank slate in 2025 and this beautiful paintbrush to kind of paint our own canvas. Do you have any advice that you'd love to share with others?
You sharing like, okay, this blank canvas, it just immediately brought me to the idea that we are all artists. You are the creator of your reality. You can paint whatever picture you want to, and you can start over as many times as you need. Throw it out, start again, add on, pick up an old canvas that you painted a couple years ago. There's no rules. There's no rules.
So awesome. Challenges are what make life interesting.
Yeah.
But overcoming those challenges is what makes life meaningful. It was a pleasure exploring some of your challenges and your story a little bit and sharing it with our ALLSMITH community.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure being here. You're amazing at what you do.
I appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Instagram's a great place, just at Kierstie_Payge. That's where all of my retreats, I've got 6 retreats this year and 2 yoga teacher trainings. Lots of amazing things going on. I've got an Egypt retreat here in a couple of weeks where I'm working with an Egyptologist.
That's cool.
And he's taking us to all the spiritual sites around Egypt. We're going to be meditating in the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to see your content
some
from that.
incredible experiences. And when you're in your zone and in your purpose, you meet the coolest people doing the coolest stuff. And it just opens up doors. So Instagram's a great place. I'm on YouTube as well. Yoga by Kierstie Payge there.
Cool.
And then I've got a website, yogakp.com.
Perfect.
Yeah, great places.
Guys,
Instagram's the best, I feel.
Instagram's awesome. It's so collaborative. It's so natural. It's playful. They're letting go of some of the boundaries that they set previously. So now it's like, spread your wings out there, guys. Share your message. And today was beautiful. I really appreciated connecting with you and having your energy in our space today. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Guys, if you enjoyed my conversation with Kierstie Payge today, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time.